What would you do if the toughest man in the courtroom looked guilty at first glance, and 10 minutes later had Judge Caprio pressing a hand against his own chest just to steady himself? Drop a comment telling us whether pride makes people stronger or lonelier, because what happened in Providence that cold October morning began with a stack of tickets and ended with a salute nobody in that room would ever forget. At 9:12 a.m. on Tuesday, October 14, 2025, inside Providence Municipal Court at 325 Washington Street, a 73-year-old Marine veteran named Harold Brennan stepped through the side door with the kind of posture that made people sit up without meaning to. Hit that subscribe button if you believe the strongest stories are the ones that look ordinary for the first 30 seconds. He wore a faded olive Marine Corps cap, a weathered Carhartt duck jacket with a busted zipper, Levi's 505 jeans gone white at the knees, and old red wing boots polished so hard they almost reflected the fluorescent lights. In his left hand he carried a manila folder creased at the edges. In his right he gripped the strap of a brown canvas bag like it might float if he let go. Like this video, if you believe first impressions can be dangerously wrong. His Timex Expedition watch was running 4 minutes fast. His face was cut with deep lines, the kind people get from years of sun, salt, grief, and refusing to talk about any of it. He looked like a man who had never once asked life to go easy on him, and hated anybody who suggested it should. The clerk had him down as case number PMCTC 25-11874, 5 citations, expired registration, lapsed inspection sticker, parking in a handicapped access zone without a placard, parking in front of a hydrant, failure to appear on a previous notice. Total balance due, $1,247.50, not counting late penalties if the court upheld everything that morning. Share this with someone who still believes every story has another side, because by the time this case was over, even the people who rolled their eyes at the beginning were wiping them by the end. What nobody knew yet was that Hal Brennan had walked into court ready to lose his truck, ready to be humiliated, and ready to bite the head off anyone who tried to pity him. What nobody knew was that hidden inside that wrinkled manila folder was one folded letter, one rehab appointment card, and one photograph that would change the temperature of the entire room. And what absolutely nobody knew was that before the morning was over, the hardest thing Hal Brennan would do was not stand in front of a judge. It would be allowing the truth to stand there with him. People started noticing him before his case was even called. The gallery was half full, mostly traffic defendants, 2 college students appealing tow fees, a woman arguing about a cracked taillight ticket, a plumber in a Navy Dickies shirt flipping through paperwork, and an exhausted mother bouncing a toddler on her knee. The room carried all the normal courtroom sounds: shoes against tile, low coughs, the scrape of benches, paper shuffling, a distant printer clicking behind the clerk's desk. Then Hal sat down in the second row, and a silence seemed to settle around him like dust. Not because he looked weak, because he looked dangerous in a different way. Not violent, not unstable, just sealed shut. Clerk Maria Alvarez saw him first up close when he stepped to the side window to confirm his file. Maria had worked that desk for 11 years. She could tell within 10 seconds who was confused, who was lying, who was broke, and who was on the edge of tears. Hal was none of those. He was controlled, too controlled. She looked at the citations, looked up at him and said gently, "Mr. Brennan, if these fines stand and the registration still isn't renewed, the city can request a compliance hold." Hal didn't blink. "Then I guess the city can request it." Maria lowered her voice. "I'm just trying to help you understand the risk." He leaned in slightly, not rude exactly, but hard. "Ma'am, I spent 20 years understanding risk. I'm here to hear what the judge says, not to be handled." There it was, arrogance, sharp, dry, immediate. A few heads turned. Maria had heard worse, but his tone carried that old-school steel that made people pull back. She slid his file to the top of the morning stack and said, "Have a seat, Mr. Brennan." He nodded once and walked away without another word. Bailiff Officer Denise Walker noticed it too. Denise was 6 feet tall, former Providence police, and not easily impressed. She watched Hal settle onto the bench, set his canvas bag at his feet, then adjust the brim of his cap with 2 fingers like he was aligning himself for inspection. He kept scanning exits, doors, corners. Hyper-alert. The kind of habit that doesn't leave a body when the war leaves the headlines. When Prosecutor Edward Mall stepped in at 9:27 a.m., carrying a black leather trial binder and coffee he wasn't supposed to have in court, Maria handed him the top files. He frowned at Hal's case almost instantly. "Repeat noncompliance," Ed muttered. "3 separate dates, that's not hardship, that's disregard." Maria hesitated. "Could be more than that." Ed gave a short, humorless laugh. "It usually is." That line would matter later. Because at 9:31, when Judge Frank Caprio entered in his robe and the room stood, Hal Brennan rose with everyone else, but he rose a fraction faster, shoulders back, jaw tight, eyes forward. He did not look at the bench the way nervous defendants do. He looked at it the way a soldier looks at command. Not submissive, not casual, measured. Case after case moved quickly. A broken meter appeal, a school zone dispute, a warning reduced to court costs. Judge Caprio was patient, funny when it fit, firm when it needed to be. The gallery relaxed the way it always did around him. A few people even smiled. But Hal Brennan never smiled. He sat with both palms on his knees, fingers spread, eyes ahead. Once he reached into his jacket pocket and touched something inside, then pulled his hand back out. At 10:08 a.m., Maria called it. Case PMC TC 25-11874, Harold Brennan. Hal stood immediately. The walk from the second row to the podium was maybe 12 feet. It felt longer. You could hear the heel of each red wing boot strike the tile. 1, 2, 3. He set his manila folder on the podium, kept the cap on, then seemed to realize where he was and removed it with deliberate care. His gray hair was clipped short, marine short, old habit again. Judge Caprio looked over the file, then up at the man in front of him. "Good morning, sir." Hal answered, "Morning, Your Honor." No smile, no excuse, no softening. Judge Caprio glanced back down. "Mr. Brennan, I see 5 citations here. Expired registration dating back to May. Inspection lapse. Parking in a handicapped access zone on August 3. Parking before a hydrant on August 17. Failure to appear on the prior notice. Is that accurate?" Hal's answer came instantly. "If that's what the paper says." There was a tiny murmur in the gallery. The line sounded defiant, maybe even mocking. The judge looked back up. "I'm asking if you disagree with the facts." Hal rested both hands on the podium. They were large hands, scarred across the knuckles, one old burn mark near the thumb. "No, sir, I don't disagree with the facts. I disagree with what they mean." That made the room lean in. If you've ever seen a person say one sentence that changes the air, you know that feeling. Like something invisible just clicked into place. Judge Caprio tilted his head slightly. Prosecutor Malloy stopped turning pages. The judge said, "All right, then help me understand what they mean." Hal stared at the file instead of the bench. "They mean I parked where I shouldn't have. They mean I was late fixing things I should have fixed. They mean I missed the last date because my granddaughter couldn't stand on her left leg without crying. They mean I'm here now." There it was, a crack in the armor, but only a hairline one. Judge Caprio asked, "Your granddaughter is injured?" Hal's jaw tightened again, as if he regretted even saying the word. "She's in rehab." Prosecutor Malloy stepped forward. "Your Honor, before we get into narrative, I do want the record to reflect this defendant has had months to resolve the registration issue, and the handicapped access citation was observed, documented, and issued properly. Repeat noncompliance puts the public at risk." Outrage hit the room in that subtle way it does before anybody speaks. Not because Malley was technically wrong. He was. But because he said it without looking at the man. Just the paper. Hal finally turned his head and looked at the prosecutor. His eyes were pale blue and startlingly cold. You ever carry a child with stitches from hip to knee while she's biting on a sweatshirt so she doesn't scream? Maria looked up sharply. Malley stiffened. Sir, I'm speaking to the legal record. Hal faced forward again. That's usually where people go when the human record gets inconvenient. A whisper broke in the gallery. Somebody murmured, "Whoa." Judge Caprio raised a hand, calm as ever. Mr. Brennan, Mr. Malley, we're going to take this one fact at a time. Then the judge did something simple, and that simple thing changed everything. He asked, "How old is your granddaughter?" Hal swallowed before answering, 12. What's her name? Lily. The name landed softer than anything else he had said. Judge Caprio nodded. What happened to Lily? For the first time, Hal hesitated. His right hand moved to the edge of the podium and gripped it so hard the veins stood out. He didn't seem like a man searching for words. He seemed like a man trying not to set something loose. Finally, he said, March 22, 4:43 p.m. Reservoir Avenue in Cranston. Pickup truck ran a red light. T-boned my daughter's Honda Civic. Lily took the door. Fractured pelvis. Torn ACL. 2 broken ribs. Nerve damage down the left side. She still walks like the ground might betray her. No one moved. Even Malley looked up now. Hal kept going, voice flat in that terrifying way pain can sound when it has nowhere safe to go. My daughter Megan was driving. Concussion. Collarbone. Back to work in 5 weeks because rent does not care about trauma. The judge's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. And on August 3, he asked quietly. Hal answered, I parked in the access zone outside Rhode Island Hospital Rehab because there was no open spot close enough and Lily's brace had cut through her skin. She was crying. I told her I'd be 3 minutes. Took me 5. Came back out to a ticket. A woman in the back row audibly sucked in air. Prosecutor Malley shifted his weight. Your Honor, while sympathetic, unauthorized parking in an access zone can still. Hal snapped before he could stop himself. You think I don't know what access means? That line hit hard. He realized it immediately. Shoulders stiffened. Face tightened. The old pride surged back in. Judge Caprio's voice never rose. Mr. Brennan, I need you to stay with me. Hal closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, there was anger there, yes, but underneath it something worse. Shame. I am with you, Judge. Judge Caprio asked, Did you bring any documentation about Lily's treatment? Hal tapped the manila folder. Some. May I see it? Hal slid the folder forward. Maria took it up to the bench. Inside were not neat legal exhibits. They were life shoved into paper form. A therapy schedule from Hasbro Children's Hospital. A photocopy of an emergency room discharge sheet. A wrinkled parking receipt. An insurance letter. A prescription printout. A sticky note with 3 appointment times scribbled in blue ink. And clipped to the back, almost hidden, a school photo of a girl with brown curls and a shy smile missing 1 front tooth. Judge Caprio glanced at the photo, then at the date on the rehab paperwork. August 3 matched. The room felt different now, still tense but not in the same direction. Then the judge found the second citation. What about August 17, parking before a hydrant? Hal's face shut down again. That one was mine, he said. No explanation. Judge Caprio looked over his glasses. Meaning no child, no emergency room, no excuse you can clap for. The line was sharp, bitter, almost daring the court to condemn him. And maybe that was the first real clue. Because people who truly don't care usually minimize. They dodge. They charm. Hal Brennan did none of that. He stood there like a man asking to be punished for more than parking, like the hydrant ticket mattered for reasons nobody else had seen yet. If you've stayed with us this far, drop a comment telling us the exact moment you realized this wasn't just a traffic case, because the next piece of evidence would make half the room stop breathing. Judge Caprio rested a hand on the file. "Mr. Brennan, I need the truth about August 17. Hal gave a humorless smile. "You've got it on paper." "That's not what I asked." The silence stretched. Then Hal said, "I parked at the hydrant on Chalkstone Avenue at 6:18 p.m. because Mrs. Alina Baptiste couldn't get her oxygen tank up the front steps." The judge asked, "Who is Mrs. Baptiste?" "My neighbor." "How old is she?" 68. "What was the emergency?" Hal's answer came slower now. "COPD, emphysema, short of breath. Her son moved to Florida and calls every third Sunday like that makes him a saint." A small nervous laugh rolled through the gallery and died instantly. Judge Caprio asked, "Why were you transporting her?" Hal looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because she needed transporting." Another silence. Judge Caprio leaned back. "Do you have any proof of that?" Hal's jaw locked. "I've got better than proof. I've got a witness, but she's on portable oxygen and I told her not to come." That was when Maria lifted another sheet from the folder. "Your Honor," she said softly, "there's a note here from a nurse." She passed it up. Judge Caprio read it without speaking at first. Then he looked toward the podium again. "This is signed by Angela Mercer, RN, Pulmonary Unit, Roger Williams Medical Center. It states that on August 17, Mrs. Alina Baptiste was admitted in acute respiratory distress, and that Mr. Harold Brennan transported her from her residence because she was unable to wait for a non-emergency ride. It also says, and I'm quoting here, patient likely avoided collapse in stairwell due to rapid assistance." Gasps, real ones. Prosecutor Malley's face changed color, just slightly but enough. And still Hal didn't soften, didn't bask in it, didn't even look relieved. Judge Caprio set the letter down and asked, "Why didn't you bring this up immediately?" Hal answered in a low, rough voice, "Because I'm not looking for a medal every time I do what a decent man should do." That line would have gone viral all by itself. You could feel it. If someone had clipped that 10-second exchange and posted it before lunch, millions would have watched it by dinner. But Judge Caprio didn't play to the moment. He looked deeper. "Mr. Brennan," he said, "decent men still have to follow the law." Hal nodded once, "Yes, sir." "And decent men also don't usually end up with 5 unresolved citations, unless something bigger is going on." Hal said nothing. The judge continued, "You told the clerk you're not here to be handled. Fine. I'm not here to handle you. I'm here to understand why a man with your record of service is standing in my courtroom with his vehicle one step from being seized." Hal's eyes flicked up sharply. "My service record doesn't buy me a pass." "No," the judge said, "it doesn't. But it does tell me you know the difference between discipline and surrender. So which one is this?" That question landed like a hammer, wrapped in velvet. Hal didn't answer. His throat moved once, twice. Then he said the first truly vulnerable sentence of the morning. "I'm a little behind." A few people in the gallery actually looked away, because somehow that one small understatement hurt more than all the hard lines before it. Judge Caprio glanced toward Prosecutor Malley. "Mr. Malley, do we have officer notes or supplemental material on the August citations?" Malley shuffled through his binder. "For the handicapped access violation, yes. Officer Daniel Ruiz included standard photos. For the hydrant violation, there may be dash or body cam reference because he approached the vehicle after issuing." Judge Caprio said, "Can we get that?" Malley looked surprised. "We can request it from traffic records." "Do that." Maria picked up the phone. And just like that, the case that looked routine stopped being routine. Hal stood frozen at the podium while the courtroom moved around him. Another hearing could have been called while they waited, but Judge Caprio didn't do that. He kept Brennan there, kept him in the moment. There was purpose in that. Anyone watching closely could tell the judge sensed the story was still buried under something thick and stubborn. While the clerk requested the footage, Judge Caprio asked, "What do you drive, Mr. Brennan?" 2004 Ford F-150 XLT. Color: Oxford white, mostly rust now. A faint smile touched the gallery. Even Hal almost smiled, but it vanished fast. How many miles? 187,000, give or take. Still running. Depends what you mean by running. Another tiny laugh, then quiet again. Judge Caprio looked back at the paperwork. Registration expired in May. Why? Hal shrugged once, didn't get to it. That answer rang false. The judge let it hang there. Didn't get to it or couldn't afford to get to it. Now Hal's nostrils flared, defensive, proud, exposed. I didn't ask anyone for money. I didn't ask if you did. The room went still again. That was one of those courtroom exchanges people remember because it isn't loud, but it cuts straight through the performance. Hal Brennan, who had looked almost untouchable for the first half hour, suddenly looked like a man balancing on the edge of something steep. Then Officer Denise Walker stepped close to the bench and handed Maria a printed update from traffic records. Maria read it, frowned, then passed it up to the judge. Judge Caprio scanned it and looked at Hal carefully. Mr. Brennan, according to this, your registration renewal was flagged for failed emissions and front brake deterioration in June. There's a repair estimate attached from Morty Auto Service in Cranston, $1,214. Hal's face went blank. Is that correct? The judge asked. Yes, sir. Did you have the work done? No, sir. Why not? Hal gave the answer everyone expected now. Didn't get to it. Judge Caprio shook his head slightly. No, that's not the truth. Hal's fingers tightened on the podium again. The judge continued, you brought hospital records, nurse letters, appointment cards. You are clearly willing to show me proof when it concerns someone else. But every time the paperwork turns toward you, you hide behind 3 words. Didn't get to it. That usually means a person is embarrassed, or scared, or both. No response. Which is it? Hal stared at the wood grain on the podium. I'm not scared. It sounded like an old habit, not an answer. Then Maria got the signal. The traffic records office had found the August 17 body cam clip and the August 3 garage surveillance stills. They were emailing them to the courtroom monitor. You could actually feel the room shift again. Because now there would be proof, not just words, footage. And everybody knows footage changes everything. Like this video, if you believe truth hits harder when it's caught on camera. Because what the court saw next did not match the picture of a reckless old man ignoring the rules. The first image loaded slowly onto the monitor to the right of the bench, grainy garage surveillance. Timestamp, 8/03/25 to 11:42 p.m. Rhode Island Hospital Rehabilitation Entrance B. Judge Caprio angled the screen so the courtroom could see. There was Hal's white F-150 nosed awkwardly into the blue-striped access zone. Clear violation, no question. Then the next frames rolled. The driver's door opened. Hal stepped out fast, came around to the passenger side, and carefully lifted a slim girl in a leg brace from the truck. She was trying to be brave. You could tell from the way she clutched his shoulder instead of his neck, like she didn't want to seem small. He shifted her weight with practiced precision. Not a panicked movement, not a reckless one. The movement of someone who had done this many times. Then in the footage, the girl's head fell against his chest. A sound moved through the room, Not a gasp this time, something softer. Hal never looked at the screen. The video continued. He carried Lily inside. 2 minutes passed. 3, 4. At 2:16:35, an enforcement officer stepped into frame, photographed the plate, placed the citation under the wiper, and walked away. At 2:17:01, Hal came back out alone, saw the ticket, stopped, closed his eyes, then did something that nobody expected. He didn't curse. He didn't rip it up. He took both hands, folded the paper with precise, almost military neatness, placed it in his pocket, then stood at the truck door for 3 full seconds with his forehead resting against the roof. In silence. That image broke something in the room. Because everybody knew that posture. Whether it was grief, anger, exhaustion, or prayer, everybody knew the look of a person who had reached the end of what he could carry in public. Judge Caprio didn't say anything for a moment, neither did Malloy. Then the judge asked quietly, "Was that the first ticket you received connected to Lily's treatment?" Hal's answer came barely above a whisper, "No, sir." "How many were there?" "3. And you only brought one before me?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" Hal swallowed hard. "Because I deserved the other 2. The judge stared at him. "And who decided that?" he asked. Hal didn't respond. The second file loaded. Body cam, Officer Daniel Ruiz. Timestamp, 8/17/25, 6:20 p.m. Chalkstone Avenue. The video shook slightly as Ruiz approached the F-150 at the hydrant. The truck was idling. Hazard lights flashed. Through the windshield, Hal was visible in the driver's seat, shoulders angled toward the passenger side. Ruiz's voice came first. "Sir, you can't stop at this hydrant." Then the camera angle shifted and the reason for Hal's posture became visible. Eleanor Baptiste sat in the passenger seat, gray-faced, oxygen tubing in place, breathing hard, one hand clawing at the door handle. Hal's voice on the recording was calm, clipped, urgent. "I know. I need 30 seconds to get her tank." Ruiz replied, "You're obstructing access." And Hal said a line that made every head in the room turn toward the real man at the podium. "You can write the ticket while I keep her alive. We can sort the order later." The officer on the recording paused. Even the body cam captured the hesitation. Then he asked, "Is she in distress right now?" Hal said, "Look at her." You could hear Eleanor wheezing. What happened next mattered even more. Ruiz holstered his citation book, helped lift the oxygen tank, and escorted them toward the steps. The hydrant ticket had already been written. He must not have voided it in the field. But on the footage, the officer's tone changed completely. "Sir, why didn't you call an ambulance?" Hal answered while hauling the tank up one-handed. "Because ambulance bills don't care if you served your country." That line sent a visible ripple through the gallery. Judge Caprio muted the monitor. Nobody spoke. And in that silence, the image of Hal Brennan shifted again. Not all at once, not completely, but undeniably. He was no longer the easy villain. No longer the stubborn repeat offender everybody thought they understood. Now he was something more complicated. A proud old Marine running on fumes, carrying people through emergencies with a truck he couldn't afford to fix, and a life he clearly could not keep taped together much longer. But the story still hadn't reached its deepest wound. Judge Caprio looked at Hal and asked, "Mr. Brennan, why did you fail to appear on the previous notice?" Hal's shoulders dipped a fraction. "September 9. "Yes." He nodded. "I know the date." "Why weren't you here?" Hal inhaled slowly. "Because I was at the Providence VA." Malloy, to his credit, didn't interrupt this time. Judge Caprio asked, "For yourself?" "A beat." "Yes, sir." That one word changed the gravity again. "For what kind of appointment?" Hal's eyes stayed down. "Cardiology." A murmur, "Immediate." The judge said, "Do you have documentation of that?" Hal almost laughed, but it came out more like a cracked breath. Of course I do. Didn't bring it. Why not? Didn't feel Ray anybody cared about my ticker. The judge's face softened, but his voice stayed steady. I care if it explains why you missed court. Hal rubbed one hand over his jaw. Stress test. Follow-up. Blood pressure through the roof. Doc said if I kept living on coffee, aspirin, and bad decisions, I'd meet St. Peter before Christmas. A few people smiled weakly. No one truly laughed. Judge Caprio asked, "Did you notify the court?" No. Why not? Because men like me are real good at showing up for everyone else and terrible at telling strangers when we're falling apart. That was the moment of realization. Not because it was dramatic, because it was honest. Even Hal seemed startled that he had said it out loud. If you know someone who carries everything alone until it nearly crushes them, hit that like button right now, because the next revelation didn't just change the case. It changed how the whole courtroom saw strength itself. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Mr. Brennan, I want to ask you something, and I need a direct answer. How much money do you actually have available right now to resolve any part of this? Hal's face hardened again immediately, pride snapping back into place. That's my business. It became the court's business when you stood before me, unable to comply. No, sir. It became the court's business when I broke city code. My wallet is still my business. There it was again. The old Marine, the man who would rather choke than be seen begging. The judge didn't flinch. Then let me rephrase. Are you financially unable to repair the vehicle? Hal said nothing. Are you choosing between basic family needs and legal compliance? Still nothing. Maria Alvarez glanced toward the gallery. She had seen this before too. The dangerous moment where a person becomes so committed to not looking weak that they start actively sabotaging the chance to be helped. Then something surprising happened. Prosecutor Edward Mal cleared his throat. Your Honor, he said slowly, if I may. Judge Caprio nodded. Mal stepped closer to the podium and addressed Hal directly, but his tone was very different now. Less official, more human. Mr. Brennan, I reviewed your payment history during the recess on the last date. There are no partial payments. None. Usually when people are struggling, we see $10 here, $20 there, something. But in your file, it's zero. That tells me either you stopped caring or you were using every spare dollar somewhere else. Which one is it? Hal looked up at him for the first time without hostility, just exhaustion. Mal continued, I'm not asking to shame you. I'm asking because this matters. Hal stared a long moment, then gave the slightest nod toward the manila folder. Back pocket. Maria opened the folder again. There, tucked behind the insurance printout, was a folded receipt packet from a pharmacy, a stack of gas station receipts, and 3 carbon copy money order stubs, each for $300, each mailed on the 1st of the month. June, July, August. Payee, Rosa Vega, San Antonio, Texas. Judge Caprio looked up. Who is Rosa Vega? Hal went still, completely still. The judge repeated, Mr. Brennan, who is Rosa Vega? When he answered, his voice sounded different than before, older somehow, further away. She's the widow of a lance corporal who died under me in Fallujah. Every sound in the room disappeared. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to pull back. Judge Caprio spoke gently, and you've been sending her money. Hal nodded once. For how long? No one expected the answer. 19 years. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Mally whispered, my God. Judge Caprio's eyes moved to the dates again. $300 a month. Yes, sir. Every month. Yes, sir. Why? Hal's throat worked. His hands bin Atok Khan, in whose stone still began to tremble. Because her husband followed my order into a street that should have been cleared. Because I told him to move left, and the blast came from the left. Because his son was born 6 months later and I got to come home and he didn't. The room shattered into silence, so complete it almost felt loud. Judge Caprio asked carefully, "Were you held responsible in the report?" Hal laughed once, a hard, terrible sound. The report said no fault. Reports don't bury people. There it was, the real ticket, the real debt, the one no court had issued and no payment could settle. Suddenly, the expired registration made sense. The unpaid repairs made sense. The missing court date, the 0 partial payments, the collapsed finances, the fury, the pride. Hal Brennan had been paying 2 sets of bills for almost 2 decades, the living bills in Rhode Island and the dead bill in his own heart. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Does your family know?" "No, sir." "Does Mrs. Vega know why you send it?" "No, sir." "What does she think it is?" Hal looked ashamed now in a way he hadn't before. "Told her it was part of an old promise between and Marines." Judge Caprio let out a slow breath. "And because of that promise, you let your truck become unsafe?" "Yes, sir." "You let legal notices pile up?" "Yes, sir." "You risked your own health?" "Yes, sir." "And you nearly lost the only vehicle you used to transport your granddaughter and your neighbor?" Hal finally looked up directly at the bench. His eyes had gone wet, though no tears had fallen yet. "Yes, sir." Then Judge Caprio said one of the most powerful lines of the day. "Mr. Brennan, guilt is not the same thing as honor." That sentence hit everybody. You could see it. Maria's eyes blinked fast. Denise Walker looked down at the floor. Even Mal took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Hal himself looked as if the words had struck somewhere physical, somewhere under the ribs. But he was not ready to receive them yet. "With respect, Judge," he said, voice tightening, "you don't know what honor costs." Judge Caprio answered without a second of hesitation. "And you don't get to decide that everybody who loves you should pay for it." That was the first true blow Hal Brennan could not deflect. He took one step back from the podium like the words had pushed him. Nobody in the room missed it. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Then from the second row behind him, a small voice said, "Grandpa." Heads turned as one. A girl stood beside the bench seat, leg brace visible under black leggings, oversized navy hoodie with a Providence Middle School logo, brown curls tied back, a pale scar just above the kneecap where the fabric shifted. Lily Brennan, 12 years old. She must have come in during the body cam review with someone from the hallway. Next to her stood Megan Brennan, Hal's daughter, still in housekeeping scrubs from Rhode Island Hospital, blonde hair pulled into a tired knot, left arm marked by the white line of an old healing fracture scar near the collarbone. Hal's face drained of color. "What are you doing here?" Megan answered softly. "Maria called. She said she thought we should come." Maria looked embarrassed but did not apologize. Lily took one limping step forward. "Grandpa, you told Mom you were behind on the truck because of medicine and insurance." Hal's voice broke into something almost panicked. "Lily, sweetheart, not now." But children have a brutal way of opening locked rooms with simple words. Lily reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out an envelope. "I found these when I was looking for the coloring pencils in your desk. All the money order receipts. Why are you sending money to people we don't know when you said you couldn't afford your breaks?" The room froze in a whole new way. Not legal tension now, family tension, naked, immediate, unstaged. Megan looked at Hal like she was seeing him from across a canyon. "Dad." Hal couldn't answer. Judge Caprio glanced toward Megan. "Ma'am, would you like to join us?" She walked forward slowly, stunned. "I didn't know about any of this." Hal turned toward her, voice low and urgent. "Meg." But she was already shaking her head. "You borrowed $200 from me in July and told me it was for the inspection." No one breathed. Hal looked like a man caught between incoming fire and nowhere to duck. Then Lily said the line that broke the first tear loose in the gallery. "Grandpa, we would have helped you carry it if you told us it was heavy." That was it. A woman in the back row started crying openly. A man near the aisle wiped his eyes and pretended he had allergies. Even if you had entered that courtroom cynical, even if you had planned to mock another internet courtroom clip before it happened, you would not have survived that sentence untouched. Judge Caprio gave everyone a moment, then another. He understood timing, understood that some truths need silence around them or people can't hear them properly. Finally, he asked Megan, "Did your father assist Lily with transportation to rehab and appointments?" Megan nodded, still staring at Hal. "3 times a week, every week, since April." "Has he been helping neighbors as well?" She let out a stunned breath. "Of course. Everybody on Maplecrest Drive calls him before they call 911. He fixes walkers, drives people to appointments, shovels snow off 3 porches before dawn. He doesn't tell people when he needs anything." Judge Caprio asked, "Does he ever ask for help?" Megan gave a sad laugh. "He'd rather glue his hand to the stove." That actually got a real laugh through the tears. Needed, human. But the judge wasn't done. "Do you know Rosa Vega?" Megan shook her head slowly. "Number should I?" Hal shut his eyes. The next twist was waiting, and it came from the last place anyone expected. Officer Denise Walker received a message on her courtroom tablet. She frowned, stepped toward Maria, whispered something, and handed over the device. Maria looked startled, then passed it to Judge Caprio. The judge read silently, brows lifting. "Mr. Brennan," he said, "traffic records reached Officer Ruiz for follow-up. He says there is an attached supplemental note he never expected to matter. It states that when he approached your truck on August 17, he also observed a medication invoice on the front seat and offered to void the citation later if you came in with proof of emergency circumstances. He writes that you never came." Hal answered instantly, "Didn't need a favor." Judge Caprio almost smiled, but there was no amusement in it. "That seems to be your life's central problem." And then he added another quote the internet would have swallowed whole. "Pride can keep a man standing long after it starts breaking everyone around him." If that line doesn't stay with you, nothing will. Drop a comment telling us whether pride is strength or fear in a better-looking uniform, because the next few minutes turned this courtroom from a place of judgment into a place of reckoning. Judge Caprio asked Hal the question nobody else had dared ask directly. "Did you believe you deserved to struggle?" Hal stared at him. The judge did not repeat it. Megan was crying quietly now. Lily leaned against her side. Mally had stopped pretending this was a routine prosecution. The whole room waited on one old Marine and one answer. Finally Hal said, "I believed I had no right to complain." "That is not the same question." Hal's lower lip twitched once. The tremor in his hands had spread into his shoulders now. Judge Caprio's voice softened. "Mr. Brennan, did you believe you deserved to struggle?" A long pause. Then, in a voice so small it barely sounded like the man we had met at the start of the morning, he said, "Yes." That single word went through the room like cold water. Judge Caprio nodded slowly, almost sadly. "There it is." He looked toward Megan and Lily, then back to Hal. "The law can address citations, but that belief right there, that belief has been sentencing you for years." No one in the room would ever forget that line. Hal blinked rapidly now. Once, twice. His control was failing in front of strangers, and for a man like him, that was almost harder than the pain itself. Judge Caprio said, "I want to know about Lance Corporal Vega." Hal drew a breath that shook halfway through. 19 years old, San Antonio kid. Loved cherry jolly ranchers and thought he could outshoot everybody. Couldn't. Talked too much. Wrote letters home every Sunday, even when there wasn't mail pickup. Married his high school girl before deployment because he said if he waited, life would play a trick on him. The courtroom listened, as if each word mattered. Hal continued, we were clearing a market road outside Fallujah. Intel said the left side had already been swept. It hadn't. I told him to move. He moved. That was enough. He stopped there, but the room heard the rest anyway. Judge Caprio asked, and since then, you've been sending money to his widow every month? Yes, sir. Have you ever spoken to her in person? No, sir. Why not? Hal looked almost ashamed of the answer. Because if she forgave me, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. That was the moment every wall in the room came down. You could actually hear people crying now. Megan put a hand over her mouth. Lily's eyes were wide and wet. Maria Alvarez looked down and blinked hard. Even Denise Walker, built like granite, had gone glassy-eyed. But Judge Caprio still had one more truth to uncover. Mr. Brennan, he said, is Rosa Vega expecting another money order this month? Hal nodded. With what funds? No response. With what funds? At last Hal whispered, I was going to sell the truck. Megan gasped, Dad. He kept his eyes down. Joe Morty offered me 900 as is. For the truck you used to take Lily to therapy. Yes. For the truck you used to take Mrs. Baptiste to appointments. Yes. For the truck you used to get yourself to the VA. Yes. Judge Caprio sat back. The room understood now. If the court had moved like routine, if no one had looked beyond the file, Hal Brennan would have walked out that day with mounting fines, a failing vehicle, a collapsing heart condition, and a private guilt plan leading him straight toward disaster. The paper would have been correct. The justice would have been incomplete. Then came the confrontation the whole story had been building toward. Judge Caprio folded his hands and said, Mr. Brennan, listen carefully. I can't run a courtroom on emotion alone. I cannot tell the city parking rules don't matter. I cannot bless unsafe vehicles on public roads. If I do that, I fail everybody else. Do you understand? Hal nodded, yes, sir. But I can decide whether this case is really about defiance, or whether it's about a proud man sinking under burdens he has no moral right to carry by himself. Hal swallowed. The judge continued, here is the choice in front of you. I can uphold these citations according to the file, note your noncompliance, and let the process see. Entenu, or I can explore lawful alternatives, continuances, dismissal of emergency-link citations, time to repair the vehicle, referral to veteran services and community assistance. But I will not do that unless you tell the truth plainly and accept help plainly, not halfway, not with sarcasm, not like you're doing us all a favor by suffering. Hal looked up, wounded and proud at the same time. I don't need charity. Judge Caprio answered with a one-liner that should be carved into courtroom walls. Mercy is not charity when justice can see the whole man. Dead silence. Then Hal said, almost angrily, and what if I don't know how to be the whole man anymore? Judge Caprio leaned forward. Then today is the day you stop pretending that's noble. Everything changed right there. You could see it in Hal's face. The anger didn't vanish. It cracked, and under it, buried so deep he may not have shown it in years, was raw grief. He turned away from the bench and looked at Lily. 12 years old, leg brace, watching him like children watch adults when they are old enough to understand pain and young enough to still believe honesty can fix it. Then he looked at Megan. Exhausted, hurt, proud too much like him. And finally, he said the sentence that marked the beginning of his redemption. I don't know how to let people help me without feeling like I failed. That was the breakthrough. Not pretty, not cinematic, not clean, real. Megan stepped forward before anyone invited her and put a hand on his arm. He flinched at first, not because he didn't want it, but because he clearly wasn't used to being steadied. She said through tears, "You didn't fail us by needing help. You failed us by hiding." Hal closed his eyes. Judge Caprio let the moment stand. Then he asked Maria to contact Veterans Outreach Services connected to the court and Joe Morty's garage in Cranston for confirmation of the repair estimate. While those calls went out, he turned to Prosecutor Malley. "Mr. Malley, your position." Malley looked at the evidence, then at Hal, then at Lily, then back to the judge. "Your Honor, in light of the emergency context documented for August 3 and August 17, I would move to dismiss those 2 parking citations in the interest of justice." A visible wave moved through the room, satisfaction, relief, the first true taste of justice served. Malley went on. "I would also ask the court to continue the registration and inspection matters for 30 days pending verified vehicle repair and legal compliance, and I would waive late penalties if the defendant participates." Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "That is a responsible recommendation." Hal looked stunned. "Why?" Malley met his eyes. "Because the law doesn't get smaller when compassion enters the room. It gets smarter." Another quote, another moment. If you believe accountability and compassion can live in the same sentence, like this video right now, because what happened next was the part nobody could have scripted better than life did itself. Just when it seemed the case had reached its turning point, Maria Alvarez stood up from the clerk's station with a strange look on her face, half disbelief, half emotion. "Your Honor," she said, voice unsteady, "there's a woman on video call from Texas, Rosa Vega." Hal's head snapped toward her so fast the entire courtroom felt it. Judge Caprio blinked. "How?" Maria answered, "When we contacted Veterans Outreach, they found a number attached to one of the support records in the folder. I don't think she knew the full reason for the payments. She asked if she could speak." Hal took a step back. "No." That one word was not angry, it was terrified. Judge Caprio looked at him with real care. "Mr. Brennan, you don't have to do this if you truly cannot, but I suspect you have spent 19 years avoiding exactly this moment." Hal's chest rose and fell visibly now. "Please, Judge." The plea in his voice broke everybody all over again. Judge Caprio asked, "Would you like a recess?" Hal said nothing. Then Lily, in that clear child voice that had already sliced through his defenses once, whispered, "Grandpa, maybe this is the heavy part." He looked at her, and something in him surrendered. Not collapsed, surrendered. Slowly he nodded. Maria turned the monitor. The video call connected. A woman in her early 40s appeared on screen, dark hair pulled back, warm, tired face, kitchen behind her, one framed Marine Corps photograph on the wall. Beside her stood a young man in college sweatshirt sleeves. 19, maybe 20. Tall, nervous, brown eyes. Rosa Vega looked directly into the courtroom camera. "Mr. Brennan." Hal could not answer at first. She tried again. "Gunny Brennan." He cleared his throat, failed, then finally said, "Ma'am." Rosa smiled sadly. "I haven't heard anyone call me ma'am that gently in a long time." There was already crying in the room again. Judge Caprio explained the basic situation carefully, not intrusively. He mentioned the payments, the vehicle issues, the fact that Hal had never disclosed the reason. Rosa listened without interruption. The young man beside her stared at Hal with a look no one could read. Then the judge asked, "Mrs. Vega, were you aware Mr. Brennan believed himself responsible for your husband's death?" Rosa's face changed. "Oh," she said quietly, "oh, Harold." Nobody had called him Harold all morning. That alone nearly undid him. She continued, "He wrote me every year on Daniel's birthday, never about himself, always about Daniel, how he made the guys laugh, how he never shut up, how he carried extra batteries for people who forgot theirs. He never wrote about guilt, he wrote about love. Hal covered his mouth with one hand. Rosa looked straight into the camera. The checks helped me, yes. God knows they did, but you need to hear this. Daniel chose that life. He believed in his men. He believed in you. If you had come to my door 19 years ago and told me to hate you, I couldn't have done it. I still couldn't. Hal's knees almost buckled. Denise Walker instinctively stepped closer. Then the young man on the screen spoke. Sir. Hal looked up. My name is Mateo. I'm Daniel Vega's son. There it was, the unexpected twist, the one no competitor would land with this kind of force if they rushed it. Mateo swallowed hard. I'm a sophomore at UTSA, criminal justice major. The money you sent helped buy books when Mom couldn't, helped keep the lights on some months. I grew up hearing your name, not as the man who got my dad killed, as the man who made sure my dad was never forgotten. At that point, there were people openly sobbing in the gallery. Mateo continued, voice shaking now too. So I need you to hear me clearly. You do not owe me your truck. You do not owe me your granddaughter's future. And you definitely do not owe me your health. Hal was crying now. No hiding it. Tears down both cheeks, chin shaking, shoulders finally giving way after what looked like decades of refusal. Rosa lifted something into frame, an envelope old and yellowed. This is the first letter you ever sent me, she said. I kept it. Want me to read the part you need to remember? Hal could barely nod. She unfolded the page carefully. You wrote, a Marine learns early that bringing a brother home is holy work. If I cannot bring Daniel home, then I will spend my life making sure his name still has a roof over it. The room melted. Literally, that's the only word for it. Every guarded face, every procedural posture, every last shred of distance. Rosa looked at the judge and said, Your Honor, I want the court to know something else. 2 months ago, I mailed one of Harold's checks back because I found out through another widow that he was doing odd jobs for cash with chest pain. He sent it again with a note that said, Please don't make me survive this by stopping. Judge Caprio closed his eyes briefly. Even he needed a second. Then Rosa said the line that would have millions replaying the clip. Harold, punishment is not the same thing as love. Hal lowered his head and wept. No tough guy tears, no single silent tear for dignity. He wept like a man finally exhausting a pain that had outlived reason. Megan wrapped an arm around him. Lily pressed against his side. Denise discreetly placed a tissue box on the podium without a word. And Judge Caprio, who had seen more human storms than most people see in 10 lifetimes, waited until Hal could breathe again before he spoke. Mr. Brennan, he said softly, look at your family. Hal did. Now look at the woman on that screen. He did. Now answer me truthfully. If Lance Corporal Vega were standing here today and saw what you have done to yourself in his name, would he call that loyalty? Hal's face crumpled. No, sir. What would he call it? Hal wiped his eyes with the heel of his palm. A waste. The judge nodded. And what would he want for Lily? Hal looked at his granddaughter. The answer came through tears. A grandfather with a truck and brakes and enough sense to stay alive. People laughed through tears again. That laugh mattered. It let hope back into the room. Judge Caprio turned to Mao. The court will dismiss the August 3 and August 17 emergency-related parking citations. The failure to appear will be excused due to documented VA medical conflict. The registration and inspection matters will be continued 30 days, conditioned on verified repairs and legal compliance. He then turned to Hal. But I'm adding something else. Everybody leaned in. You will meet with Veterans Outreach before leaving this building. You will permit your daughter to know your financial situation. You will not sell that truck out from under the people who depend on it. and you will accept community help without treating it like an insult." Hal stared stunned. Judge Caprio added, "Because justice without compassion is just paperwork with a gavel, and compassion without a counter. Bility is just sentiment. Today, we are going to practice both." That was the courtroom line of the day. Maybe the month. Maybe the year. Then Maria Alvarez stood up again, voice trembling with a smile this time. "Your Honor, Joe Morty is on the line from the garage." Judge Caprio nodded, put him through speaker. A crackling voice filled the courtroom, thick Rhode Island accent. "Yeah, Judge Joe Morty here." "Mr. Morty," the judge said, "do you know Mr. Harold Brennan?" "Know him. That stubborn old Marine's been patching my porch railing every winter for 6 years because he says my knees are shot and my work is embarrassing." The room laughed. Joe kept going. "And before you ask, yeah, I gave him that estimate. Front brakes, emissions work, tie rod end, inspection stuff. Told him I'd cut labor if he let me. He told me he'd rather push the truck into Narragansett Bay." Even Hal laughed through tears at that, which felt like a sunrise. Judge Caprio asked, "Would you still be willing to do the repairs?" Joe answered instantly. Already started the order sheet, and before he argues, 3 local businesses heard what was going on through my shop waiting room. Parts are covered. Labor's covered. The VFW post on Park Avenue chipped in within 20 minutes. Tell him to shut up and bring me the keys. The courtroom erupted. Not chaos, joy, the kind that bursts out before decorum can catch it. Hal shook his head in disbelief. "No, no, I can't." Judge Caprio cut in gently but firmly. "Yes, you can." Hal looked cornered again by kindness, which for him was almost harder than law. "I'll pay it back." Joe barked through the speaker. "You'll do no such thing. You can pay it forward by staying alive long enough to annoy everybody another 20 years. More laughter, more tears. Then Judge Caprio asked the question that set up the moment the title promised. "Mr. Brennan, do you understand what is happening here?" Hal's voice was wrecked but steadying. "Yes, sir." "What is happening?" Hal looked around the room. At Megan, at Lily, at Rosa and Mateo on the screen, at Joe crackling through speakerphone, at Mally who had shifted from prosecutor to participant in Grace, at Maria and Denise, at Judge Caprio. And then he said, "The room I came in prepared to fight is trying to carry me instead." Nobody moved, nobody blinked. Judge Caprio smiled sadly. "That's right." Hal straightened, slowly, deliberately. He wiped his face, smoothed the front of his Carhartt jacket, picked up his Marine Corps cap, then stopped. He didn't put it back on, he set it on the podium. His hands were still trembling, but now it looked different, not like collapse, like release. Then he stood as straight as a flagpole. The whole courtroom sensed it before he moved. Every whisper died. Every cough stopped. Even the little toddler in the back went quiet, as if the room itself understood it was entering one of those rare human seconds that people talk about years later. Hal Brennan lifted his right hand to his brow and gave Judge Caprio a full Marine salute. Not casual, not theatrical, perfect. Crisp wrist, fingers flat, eyes forward. It was not the salute of a man honoring power. It was the salute of a man acknowledging dignity, maybe his own for the first time in years. The room shattered into tears. Judge Caprio didn't return a military salute because he knew what it meant. Instead, he rose slowly from the bench and placed his right hand over his heart. Then he said, in a voice that trembled just enough to reveal the weight of it, "Mr. Brennan, I accept that with humility. But today, sir, this court salutes the life you still have left to live. There are moments that feel bigger than the walls around them. This was one." You could hear sobbing now, full, unguarded. Megan covered her face. Lily cried into Hal's sleeve. Rosa wiped tears on the video screen. Mateo looked away, overwhelmed. Even prosecutor Mally had gone red-eyed. Maria Alvarez was openly crying at the clerk's desk. And Hal lowered his hand slowly, as if it weighed 100 pounds more than before. Then he did something maybe even harder than the salute. He turned toward Lily, got down carefully onto one knee despite his age, despite the stiffness in his back, despite the whole courtroom watching, and said, "I'm sorry I made you think carrying things alone is brave." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "No," she whispered through tears, "but letting us help is. If that didn't melt your heart, nothing will. Share this with someone who needs proof that the strongest people are not the ones who never break. They're the ones who finally tell the truth before it's too late." The hearing could have ended there and it would have been unforgettable. But Judge Caprio, true to form, made sure emotion became action. He instructed Maria to schedule a compliance review 31 days out. He had Veterans Outreach come directly to the courtroom hallway. He requested that a written note be sent to Officer Daniel Ruiz commending his discretion and follow-up. He had the clerk print a summary order so no one could later misunderstand the conditions. This was not random mercy. It was structured mercy, grounded, lawful, useful. Before adjourning, Judge Caprio looked once more at Hal and said, "You have people depending on you. That means you no longer have the luxury of self-destruction disguised as honor." Hal nodded through the last of his tears. "Yes, sir." The judge added, "And when you feel that old guilt talking again, I want you to remember something.